wonderful book for spiritual wisdom, but a great source for government structure and functioning. Let me just give you a couple of examples. The 1639 Charter, or Constitution for Connecticut, called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, was written by Reverend Thomas Hooker, who had a profound influence on our founders, by the way. And he based most of the ideas in the Constitution from the book of Deuteronomy. All the colonial constitutions drew heavily from the biblical text. Our founders discussed the Jethro model, as seen in Exodus chapter 18, verses 13 through 26, where Moses is too busy adjudicating for way too many Israelites. His father-in-law suggests that the people be organized into smaller, manageable units, where a representative of each family had a voice and a vote. There was an emphasis on strong local self-government. This is why our founders tell us in the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers and at the Constitutional Convention, the best government that governs is the one that governs by your home, locally. The farther away our government governs, the more problems we have. The farther away our money leaves our pocket, the more problems it has. And when it leaves home and goes to D.C., we have corruption. And our founder says, local control, local control. Where did they get the idea? From the Scriptures. Well, they had other sources like Cicero and others, but they got them from the Scriptures. Exodus 18:26 says, the hard causes they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. That's why we have a system of government that has your village, your city, your county, your state, this federal form of government that was broken down locally. Our founders studied Exodus 19:8, 2 Samuel 2:4, 1 Chronicles 29:22, where leaders were elected and new laws were approved by common consent of the people. Common consent of the people. Do you ever wonder where they got the phrase, we the people? It comes from a congregational understanding of equality and people choosing their leaders. Not because you were born into royalty, but because you were a man or a woman of integrity. And you were chosen by the people to lead the people. There are thousands of such examples in our founders' biblical mindset. Next slide, please. It should not surprise us that since our first president, George Washington, all the way down to Barack Hussein Obama, our presidents have been sworn in on the Holy Scriptures. Now here's Washington, of course, open to the book of Deuteronomy. There's Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman in 1949. By the way, he ended up kissing the Bible that day, and then at his inaugural address, this is after FDR died, then when he was reelected and was sworn in his inaugural address in 1949, he says something that blows away the ACLU, blows away the people of Freedom from Religion Foundation down in Madison. They hate these things because they don't know how to deal with the historical reality. But Truman, in speaking to the cosmology of the communists in the Cold War in 1949, says, we believe all men are created equal because man is made in the image of God. The image of God, the Imago Dei. Truman is actually going to the book of Genesis chapter 1. That cosmology coming through, you see. And there's Ronald Reagan being sworn in on the Bible. And of course, as you know, Reagan declared with the Democrats and Republicans, 1983 was called the year of the Bible, year of the Bible. Once again, ACLU and other organizations, Freedom from Religion Foundation down in Madison, they despise the historical reality of our nation. We have truth, veritas, to rest upon in this nation. And it's important for us to get that out to our friends, our neighbors, and for our children to know this. Now, by the way, but the world and mindset of our first noble, integral, and Christian president is a far cry from the world of our 44th president, whose use of the Judeo-Christian symbolism cannot fool those of us who know his worldview, his mindset, his past Marxist and anti-Christian educational influences. In his biography, he tells us at college, in Occidental College, and eventually Columbia, that he surrounded himself with what? Marxist professors and structural feminists. Structural feminists use a Marxist paradigm. They denigrate the Scriptures of an idea of the beauty of the family of God, how the family is to be in accordance with the Scriptures. Any family goes. Adam and Steve and Ellen and Eve, not Adam and Eve. It's an anti-biblical way of creating the family, and it's permeating in our culture and our society. So just because, in fact, one of the clever moves by socialists and Marxists is to use language to fool the people. I am shocked that Senator Obama actually said he surrounded himself with Marxist professors. If he was smart, he would have said progressives. It's just another word for Marxists, you see. But the cat's out of the bag. I was telling people this in 2007, 2008. Do you realize what his worldview is all about? You're going to trust Oprah over the reality of what this man is about? He was in a church for 20 years under Reverend Wright, who was so wrong, he declared that Jesus wasn't Jewish but black, who said that God should damn this country because it's an evil country. He hated whites. He preached about hating whites and black supremacy in his church in Chicago. And that man was in that church for 20 years, with all due respect to Pastor Dennis. If I was here for 2 minutes and I heard the stuff that came out of Reverend Wright's mouth, I'd be out the door so fast. And I'd let everybody know there's heresy being taught there. I've earned this water. Now, how did we get from the devotion of the Pilgrims, the Puritans, the Presbyterians, the Congregationalists, the Lutherans, the Quakers, the Baptists, the Episcopalians, and Christians of all backgrounds to the bizarre world of Occupy Wall Street? How have we come that far? It started about 100 years ago when the advent of progressive Fabian socialists. Notice I didn't say Marxists. They were Marxists, but they were clever. They use language to fool the people, to fool the college professors, to fool the presidents of the universities, the principals at school, to fool the people to thinking that this is the route to go. This progressive Fabian socialism accelerated with the creation of the God-hating ACLU in 1920. And its success in driving God out of our public schools and in having a staff of thousands of lawyers scouring the land for potential court cases that will take God out of the government. Organizations like the ACLU, People for the American Way, Freedom from Religion Foundation are constantly looking for ways to deny our God, our biblical heritage, our godly heritage in this nation. It is so crazy that the governor of the state of Wisconsin actually wants to call the Christmas tree a Christmas tree, and they're going crazy. It's a Christmas tree. Did you hear it just last week? And the lawyers are out there, and Governor Walker, God bless him, is standing for the truth and calling it a Christmas tree. These God-hating organizations lie about our nation's Christian history. They have thousands of writers and so-called scholars revising our history. Remember, Karl Marx said, the first thing we must do is rewrite the history books. They're controlling our textbooks, intimidating school districts, university professors, government offices with lawsuit upon lawsuit. But I have a couple of slides here. Why are we, can you imagine, guys? We've gotten to the point where we're all socialists now? Our major news magazine in this country says we're socialists now? This destruction of our biblical heritage was accelerated with the cultural Marxists in our universities in the 1940s and 50s. And especially in the 60s as they began to indoctrinate a whole new left-wing generation, hating our founders, hating the Bible, hating this Judeo-Christian heritage of our nation. Those Marxist professors created new Marxist professors in our universities. And I had a number of them at Arizona State back in the 70s. 3 years ago, I cried when Obama was elected president. And the inauguration, not the inauguration, the election at November 4th. Do I have that one of Obama, by the way? Could you go? Yeah, right here. I was out in my backyard. It was a beautiful night on November 4th. I was actually playing Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and the neighbor lady actually was puzzled because she knew I was crying. She came over the fence like, Jake, what's up with you? And she's thinking, I know you don't care for Obama. I mean, she loved Obama. And I said, this is a sad day in our history. Because I promise and guarantee you, people are not understanding this multifaceted, layered cultural Marxism that's about to ascend even more so upon the land. And I didn't go into this that night because it was her night to celebrate, etc. She left the fence. But I thought to myself, the juxtaposition came into mind, I couldn't believe it. Here is President Obama at Grant Park in Chicago. Look at it. I was there when change happened at Grant Park, November 4, 2008. There's Reverend Jesse Jackson, right, crying away because the Messiah has come to deliver us from the horrible oppression that's happening in this nation, right? We'll flip the next slide. That's Grant Park in 1968. So being the history geek that I am, I was actually kicked out of school in 1968 for wearing all black and a black glove. That's a whole nother long story. I was 12 years old. I was kicked out of school. I think I've been this way since I came out of the womb. If you look, the reason I was crying is I see President Obama, elect that night, great speech giver, right? Great speech giver. But as he was, I said, people understand what's going on here. He's at Grant Park. What was Grant Park? Remember Bill Ayers that Obama didn't know? The Marxist professor who called for before he was a professor, he was a member of the Weather Underground, calling for a Marxist revolution with weapons in the streets. Kill Americans. He blew up bombs at the Pentagon. He said, I regret I didn't blow up more bombs to destroy America. He hated the Judeo-Christianity of this country. He went underground, then he came above ground, and he became a professor. A teacher of teachers who now teach in our schools. In Chicago, in New York, and around the country. But there they are, flying, burning the American flag, desecrating the American flag. Can you see what flag they're flying at Grant Park, 1968? It's a communist flag. It's a North Vietnamese communist flag. Communist, which hates Jesus, which hates the scriptures. These rebels, in essence, saying we need to have a revolution. So no, it's not through guns today. It could be tomorrow, but right now it's through the textbooks, through the classroom, through Hollywood, through the prose, the writings, the poetry that is out there, the influences that we see in television and all around us. These kinds of cultural things are coming into our culture today. They're in our state assemblies, our courtrooms, our Congress, in the White House, in Hollywood. They write kids' books. They teach our neighbors' children. When you look at the Occupy Wall Street crowd from New York to Oakland, there's a nefarious anti-Christian mob group think. Mob group think. This book right here, I used in the college class on the history of the 60s. I had no choice, I had to use it. But look, at Days of Rage comes from the militant 60s. That's the poster for the Occupy movement. The poster was popular. This style of poster was popular in the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Hammer, sword. Now, theoretically, next slide, it's supposed to be that this statue was found by the United Nations. It's supposed to be where, your swords are being taken into plowshares, right? But it was given to us by a communist from the Soviet Union in 1959. But people don't recognize this Days of Rage has its roots in cultural Marxism. That's why right now as we speak, cops are having to arrest dozens of people in Portland, Oregon from the Occupy movement. There's a real, vile, nefarious, militant element to the Occupy movement that's happening. Now, by the way, when I went down to Madison, I go there quite a bit, and I like to walk around the crowds of the Occupy people, or when I defended the governor back in February, and they're carrying signs that Walker is Hitler and Stalin, and they've got signs of Socialist Party of America, and they're advocating for teachers to learn about Karl Marx. Well, I went to the Occupy Madison crowd, went down there, and just asking questions. Okay, I teach history. Can I have one of your signs? And this one struck me. Don't accept less than you deserve. 99%. This is an entitlement mentality that goes way back in history, where people believe that they're entitled to stuff and things and property and money from the producers in the culture. Don't accept less than you deserve, 99%. This selfish, egocentric, entitlement, me generation mentality has been led down the wrong path. The Christian roots, character, and foundation of this nation is dying. And I hate to say it, but many Christians, many Americans are not aware of what's happening. Our founders warned us that a day would come, and God forbid that this is the generation, when many people would be indifferent to the corruption of the culture. They would look away, put their heads in the sands, as the powers that be and the masses would demand what they deserve. And come hell or high water, they're going to get it. I mean, I dared to be foolish enough to say to the governor of Wisconsin, you know what? I'm willing to pay 12.5%. I'm willing to pay into my retirement. I'm willing to do that. We're broke. We got to stop spending money we don't